Everybody. This is Tom Adams with the Ocean Project. Thanks for joining us today, and we're excited to have everybody here as we continue our webinar series. Today we're going to talk about trying to, let me get this going here. Well, this is a reminder that this is something that everybody who works at a zoo and aquarium who's interested in doing work on public policy is a resource nobody else has. The ability to make these connections and have these powerful visual images are special tools, and we'll get into how we use them a little bit today. Just a quick review of our agenda, and we'll talk a little bit about engagement strategies and tactics just at the outset. Then Katie Cubina from the Mystic Aquarium is going to do a presentation about a great campaign they had that helped lead to the creation of the Northeast Canyons and Seamounts National Marine Monument off the New England coast. Following Katie, we'll hear from Mark Antoniewicz, who is a former, well, currently is the Director of Communications at the Hip Hop Caucus. But prior to that, he worked for President Obama's Council on Environmental Quality and was involved on in the administration for getting that monument created. And so he'll talk a little bit about how he saw the effectiveness of what Mystic and several other institutions who were working on the monument were able to impact. And then at the end, the last section, last half or so of the presentation, we'll get into more specific strategies and ideas about how you can engage, tactics you can use, and examples that some zoos and aquariums are using, and then a very short review of the AZA Congressional Reception and Lobby Day, which is coming up in a couple of weeks, actually week after next. So that's me. And what a friend of mine told me after our last webinar, the one thing that I didn't do is tell anybody about myself and what allows me to speak about about engaging in public policy. So I want to do that real quickly from the outset. I've been in Washington for, I hate to say it, more than 30 years now. I started on Capitol Hill and worked there till 1993, and after that started doing nonprofit conservation advocacy work at National Parks Conservation Association. I worked on the California Desert Protection Bill, which is the largest parks and public lands bill for the continental United States, and also a bill that transferred the Presidio property in San Francisco from the Army to the National Park Service, where it's now part of another park there. After that, I went to work at National Audubon Society, working primarily on ecosystem restoration campaigns, most notably the Everglades, where I helped draft and enact the bill that created the plan to restore the Everglades. Also spent some time in the Mississippi River and a little bit of time in the Puget Sound and Chesapeake Bay issues. And then shortly after I left Audubon, I ended up being the Director of Federal Government Relations at Chicago Zoological Society, Brookfield Zoo, where I began my relationship with a lot of people in the zoo and aquarium community, and continue to this day to be really bullish on the potential and opportunities that zoos and aquariums have on public policy issues. So that's a little bit about me. That's enough about me, actually. So this is a slide, and all of the materials that are going to be presented today, the slides, will be distributed on a PDF file to folks afterwards. So this will be in there. But this gives you a sense of the type of ideas that you can do. And the general nature of this is the ones at the top are really the easiest to do. You know, you can sign a petition, but that doesn't, that has a lower value. So as you go down this chart, the value of the interactions get a little bit higher, going down to the last two, in my experience, which are handwritten letters, not just clicking a button and having a form letter sent, but something that personalizes your story, and then also that take the time to meet with a legislator or their staff. That's where you begin to get more value of it. But all that stuff takes time, and you don't have to do that to engage on policy issues. There's other contributions you can make short of that if you aren't able to invest those resources. And so we'll revisit a lot of these themes on this slide here, but these are really what I think are the really foundational elements that people could incorporate, and the resources that they can incorporate into engaging their audiences. A couple of them, in the last webinar, we talked about the view that guests have of you being a trusted source of information. That is huge. We'll get into that a little bit more. Then it's how you use your staff and facilities to engage people while they're there and even once they leave. And then the last thing I think which is important is there is a real emphasis from zoos and aquariums to evaluate efforts like this. And that really helps you understand if the message is connecting. And I think that can help people who are allies working on the same issue, who aren't necessarily zoos and aquariums, fine-tune their message. So that's both a powerful tool you have internally and something that can really help others. So that leads us to Katie Cubina and the Mystic Aquarium and their efforts on the National Marine, the Marine Monument that's mentioned there. Katie is, as it says here, is their Senior Vice President for Mission Programs. She has more than 20 years of nonprofit experience to oversee mission-based initiatives at Mystic, bringing together education, research, and exhibits under the banner of conservation. As project director on 2 grants with the Department of Justice totaling $4.25 million, she oversaw the development and implementation of the conservation-focused STEM mentoring program with thousands of youth in over 100 high-need communities around the nation. She also serves in the Aquarium and Conservation Partnership Executive and Policy Committees and the New England Ocean Science and Education Collaborative. Mystic had a great camp, in my view, a great and we wanted to have her here because this monument is, pretty much out their backyard and from them. So it's an example of doing something that is really close to home. And I'm just continue to be impressed at how they were able to do so much with the limited budget they have. So Katie, I turn it over to you, and I'll give you your first slide.
Thanks, Tom. Appreciate it. And on a good day, I get a kiss from a sea lion, but that's not common. So I really appreciate the opportunity to share our story with this group. I think, like many of you out there, conservation is an institutional priority. It became elevated for us with our 2020 One Ocean, One Mission strategic plan that we launched in 2015. So we were ripe for a project like this, but given that this was an institutional first for us and also an institutional win for us, I would say that a lot of hard work went behind it, but also the stars aligned for us, which was really, we were really grateful for. And I would also say that it really, it was successful because we had institutional buy-in for this effort and this advocacy campaign all the way from the top down and the bottom up. That said, I will say that a campaign like this really takes a village, and we couldn't have done it without so many outstanding partners and groups that we were deeply engaged with. One of those was the Protect New England Ocean Treasures Coalition of groups that really advocated for the Northeast Canyons and seamounts as a great target for a Marine National Monument designation. And those entities, as part of that, there were many, but the more prominent ones was Pew, NRDC, New England Aquarium, Conservation Law Foundation, and there were certainly others. Also, it was our connection with the National Ocean Protection Coalition, who is committed, a group committed to marine protected areas and protection of the Antiquities Act and marine monuments. And then, of course, the Aquarium Conservation Partnership, which is a subgroup of AZA. And then, grateful to say that, we funders did come to the table to support the efforts that we were able to develop and execute both on-site and off-site. So related to, getting there, it was really about a year that we invested prior to the designation by President Obama in September of 2016. But we really started with the science. And one of the pieces that propelled us into this effort is that one of our senior scientists, Dr. Peter Auster, had spent the last 30 years studying this region that now encompasses the Northeast Canyons and Seamounts Marine National Monument. He is a deep sea researcher and explorer, a conservation biologist and marine ecologist. And together with Scott Krause from New England Aquarium, who focused more on the surface animals, whales, dolphins, et cetera, seabirds, those two put together a scientific analysis that was really at the crux of creating the case for this being a unique and special place that was worthy of protection. So the other piece that ended up being really pivotal for us is that we had a champion in Senator Blumenthal for really getting the case together, putting the proposal forward to the White House for designating this area. And he was the New England senator who really stepped up and was eager to be the face and the proponent of this and put forth the proposal. So with the support of the Connecticut delegation, we participated in press events. We wrote op-eds and editorials. We put out some press releases. We really kicked off this in a major way on campus with World Ocean Day. And I'll sort of switch to the next slide if you can, Tom. So on World Ocean Day, we created a suite of products to put out there to our guests. We developed these comment cards advocating for the marine monument. We put out a table where our guests could sign these cards. We developed a video public service announcement, which Tom actually showcased at the last webinar that featured our scientist talking about why this place is special and why it is also vulnerable to human and industrial activities and therefore worthy of protection. We ran that video PSA for a period of about 4 months in our Marine Theater show. You got a glimpse of that theater with the sea lion, but particularly in the summer months, we see upwards of 500,000 people through that venue. And so it was that tied with the ability for them to learn about this special place, develop an opinion about that, and then many of them chose to fill out these comment cards. At the end of that sort of time period, we were able to collect over 1,000 of these comment cards and hand deliver them to the White House Council of Environmental Quality. It wasn't the first meeting we had there with CEQ, but certainly a great outcome. And we had a member of our Youth Conservation Corps put in a blog that also, showed the youth voice and engagement in this particular designation. And then we also followed this up with a public speaking event. We have a public speaker series, so we had Dr. Auster present on the science, and we had Senator Blumenthal at that event who could speak to the designation. So moving to the next slide there, it was a gratifying moment when the designation came to pass. I will point out that we were requested to be the first entity to put out the press release when it was designated. I think that speaks to the fact that aquariums are a trusted voice for this type of activity, that it was grounded in science and backed by public support. But also it shows all of the partners who are engaged in the designation, and just showing that partnering is so critical for this type of activity to have this kind of impact. So we knew that that wouldn't be the end. So if we go to the next slide, we sketched out a plan of what we would do post-designation. Certainly, we were committed to informing the management plan, and we actually have a meeting scheduled next week with the monument manager to move that forward. We've been working on setting up more research and exploration cruises. One and perhaps two are scheduled for this summer that our scientist is participating in and helping to lead the science cruise plan. And we reached out to some of our committed partners and were able to garner some funds to develop an exhibit at Mystic Aquarium that we all felt like that was really critical to bring the monument to the people, because having this area be 150 miles off the coast of Cape Cod, most people will never ever visit this place. So how do you convey to people just how special this place is? And so we elected to do that with a photographic exhibit. We continued to do education outreach to both formal and informal audiences, and remain committed to being a convener on public policy issues related to ocean protection and also New England fisheries. The one thing we didn't anticipate is that very soon after the monument was designated, there was a reaction to it on several fronts. And so we and many of, really all of those organizations have been involved in defensive measures to maintain the strength of the protections in this area almost since its inception. Moving on to the next slide, just wanted to show you a visual of that exhibit that we have at Mystic Aquarium. So again, that's on the pathway to our marine theater and gives people a real sense of why this place is important, uses that name, Blue Park, which has been sort of coined to get people to think about these places in much the same way our national parks. And we've been really thrilled with the response we've had. Our audiences have been really happy to learn more about this place, but also have a role in it. So even in this exhibit, there's a call to action that if people feel that protecting special places in the ocean is important to them, to please let their representatives know. We have a rolling monitor at the end with some more specific timely pieces related to that, particularly the administration's most recent executive orders that have asked for a review of monuments as we move forward. So places that we are able to change up our message as it relates to current events. And then, we had a whole website dedicated to this as well, and we continue to engage our audience as the landscape changes to keep them engaged and make sure their voices provide a platform so their voices can be heard. So all in all, it was a real, as I said, a real institutional win for us. We have, like most of you, some great resources at our disposal. We have fantastic educators and outreach individuals. We have videographers, we have a marketing department, a PR department. And so working together internally across all of those departments, we were able to really bring all of our internal resources to bear, couple that with some external funding, and really make this a big initiative for us that was successful all around. So I'll pause there, Tom. I will say that most recently, we've also been engaged in a similar effort. We've learned some good lessons from the monument advocacy campaign, and we've done something recently around the Magnuson-Stevens Act reauthorization with some help from the Ocean Project. And over a 1-week period, we were able to collect over 1,600 comment cards that we are now in the process of delivering to representatives in the state of Connecticut, Massachusetts, and Rhode Island, as there are a couple of bills coming up on the House that are looking to weaken that particular legislation. So we really got our feet wet in a big way with the Marine National Monument designation, but we're now leveraging that skill set that we developed to do more in more efficient and effective ways.
Great. Well, I want to add a couple of things. The first thing is that it's great how involved you guys are staying in the implementation of it, because half the battle is getting something either created by a presidential declaration under the Antiquities Act, which is what this was, the Northeast Canyons and Seamonts Monument was done, or having Congress pass it. At that point, it's established, but you have to develop a management plan, and that's where the rubber hits the road in terms of how a resource is actually going to be protected. It's not the line around it. So great that you guys are doing that, and that you've continued to learn on it. In truth in advertising, I guess I was a technical advisor to a lot of this stuff that you guys were doing, and it felt like all I was doing was confirming what you guys had already figured out. So it was a great effort. So we'll turn now to Mark Antoniewicz, who is takes pride in being from Wisconsin and being a Packers fan, but he is now the director of communications, as I mentioned earlier, at the Hip Hop Caucus, and he brings to that position a passion for connecting people to positive change, protecting the planet for future generations, and ensuring that the most vulnerable are at the forefront of policy solutions. And I should add that they have a really innovative climate change campaign that they have going on, and they're working on some other environmental issues as well. So I think it would be great at some point for Mark and the Hip Hop Caucus to connect with some zoos and aquariums. I think there's some real possibilities. So before he joined the Hip Hop Caucus, Mark was a political appointee to the White House Council on Environmental Quality under President Obama, where he helped lead external outreach on climate, environment, and natural resource conservation and energy issues. He served as a public affairs advisor to senior White House officials and worked to create opportunities to highlight policy impacts, engage new communities, and enhance collaborative relationships to build support for action. As a member of President Obama's environmental team, he was involved in initiatives such as the Paris Climate Agreement, the Clean Power Plan, and efforts to ensure access to clean energy, economy, and outdoors for all, and several national monument designations. And that's where my path crossed with Mark, Bill Motz as well, who is on some of the stuff we did before, even before Mystic got their campaign going. So Mark is, I think, a great resource to hear relative recent history of how not just Mystic, but there's the Aquarium and Conservation Partnership, which supported Mystic's efforts, and they were working on other designations in other areas, as well as other organizations that were working on these monuments. So to hear from him what kind of resonated, what worked, and how it was received by the Obama administration. And I'm sorry, there is Mark's picture now. I don't know who the guy on the right is. So Mark, it's all yours.
Thank you, Tom. Can you hear me okay?
If you could turn your volume up a little, it'd be good.
How about now? Is that all right?
Better. Perfect.
Cool. Hey, everybody. So glad to be joining you today. I just want to start out by certainly thanking our hosts. But I just want to say that when I think of oceans now, I think of Mystic Aquarium and Katie's great work, Sylvia Earle, Philippe Cousteau, Steve Zissou, Bill Mott, and Tom Adams. So I'm a big fan of everyone's work here on the phone, on the webinar. And of course, I am at the Hip Hop Caucus now, and I think what led me to join the Hip Hop Caucus are groups like the Mystic Aquarium and the Aquarium Association. I think seeing that how critical unique voices are in the process really showed me that, number one, they're in the fight to begin with. They're oftentimes leading the fight. And it's really critical for the success. And I think here at Hip Hop Caucus, especially, you have a lot of key phrases that come out of hip hop culture that we like to use in the policy process. And one of those is that we engage in the political process because you are at the table, either you're at the table or you're on the menu. And I think that comes to mind when I think of the aquarium. I mean, you all are protecting nature. You're showing the public, you're connecting them with the oceans, making it more relevant for all of them to see how you can make a difference and why we need to protect these resources and wildlife and such. So, as the slides are pointing out, I'll keep this relatively brief because I think Katie covered a lot of ground. I think, especially for the Northeast Canyons and Seamounts Marine Monument, I mean, this was so special because, not only was it protecting such delicate land and wildlife, but the fact that it was the first monument in the Atlantic Ocean. So I think, organizing it took months and years of kind of grassroots efforts in the aquarium. Being a leading voice in that process was just absolutely massive. And I think when it came time, obviously, like on all the monuments, President Obama and the team helped roll out and designate. It does take months and months, and some are ready to pop soon. Some are, you have to hold them till the time is right politically. Whatever the case is, aquariums within that process as a unique voice was just absolutely crucial. And I think, I love all the green groups out there, and so many of them supported, from Sierra Clubs to the NRDCs of the world, supported all of the efforts to designate these places. I think what sticks out is the fact that the aquarium was the leading voice in helping corral many times and lead that. And so I can't reiterate that enough. I think the fact that Mystics, was willing to get out there and put their foot in the water, no pun intended here, and really drive this process from the beginning, and being that voice within the community that like regionally people could connect with, but then I think everyone should know aquariums, and so many people do and have experienced aquariums, that it was really like when you see aquariums leading that charge, it just sticks out even much more. And so, I think one of the things we try to do here is really tear down silos within the progressive movement to make change. And I think we all have realized that divided, we're not going to do a whole lot, but together we can accomplish anything. And I think if anything, behind all the monuments we did, from Bears Ears monument to Paris Climate Agreement to the Clean Power Plan, and so on and so forth, like those things would not have happened had it not been for a very unique and a diverse set of voices pushing them. So we often, I met with green groups all the time, and I'm still, part of that community here in DC. But my most memorable meetings at the White House were with folks outside those communities, and aquariums, and meeting with the Sea Youth Rise Up group that Bill Mott helped put together. Those were very memorable moments, not only for the unique voices that were in the room. And I just want to point out that I took a selfie with one of the kids, asked me to take a selfie with him, which I was just completely flattered by. It was pretty funny. But I think that was my first and last selfie with someone who came in to lobby us on something. But my point is, like, I have always remembered those meetings the most. And I think that just shows you how critical they are at that moment. To get in tune with the rest of the community, get in tune with where the White House and the Department of Interior and NOAA, where all those groups are coming together, and to create that moment and ready and get out to the public and talk about why this is so important. So, I think Brian Deese, President Obama's senior advisor for climate issues, him stepping up and on all of these and driving kind of pedal to the metal, especially at the end of the administration, having him as a Northeasterner, and he visited Mystic, he was really keen on getting this through. And I think just having that voice of you all in that process was absolutely critical. I think, I can leave it at that. I'm happy to answer any specific questions. I just want to point out that the cards that Katie's team helped develop with all the kids, they did hand deliver them to my office, and they actually rolled them in. There's like thousands of them, and rolled them in with 2 radio flyer wagons. And so I remember things like that too. And it was just such a pleasure to work with Katie and the team, and Bill and Tom. But I think, I can just reiterate once again, like how powerful unique voices are. And, I certainly saw that while I was at the White House, and wanted to, in my next career step here, wanted to join a similar organization that's really out there to move hearts and minds with stories, familiarity. And so with, especially hip hop being the #1 genre in the world right now, and so many artists, good and bad. I mean, obviously, at Kanye the past week or so, but so many artists like Beyonce and Jay-Z and on down the line talking about issues that matter, whether it's social justice issues or the environment. Folks are out there, and they are critical influencers within their communities. And so you're not going to bring any more folks into a movement or to call for action unless you're engaging them with a trusted communicator, trusted and respected. And that's just I'm talking about famous artists, but I look at aquariums in the same sense. Like, they are very trusted, very respected within their community, and without their voice pushing for protection of what's so sacred and Earth's resources, it's just not going to have the same impact. So I just want to thank all of you, and I end it with, either you shape the policy or let the policy shape you. And I think that just about sums it up. We all got to play in this game, and I think Mystic certainly figured it out. I think thanks to Tom and Bill again for hosting me, but I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thanks, Mark. I mean, I just want to sort of add one thing. In my past experience when I was a congressional staffer, the same reaction is sometimes it just feels like it's Groundhog Day, where the same, set of groups are coming in and saying the same thing and doing the same thing, whether or not it's relative to where an issue is in the process. It was always fun to hear somebody from a different perspective tell a different story. And I think that's, zoos and aquariums are storytellers in large part, and they're good at it. And I think that is, and I'm going to put words in Mark's mouth, but I think that might be one of the reasons why, the efforts that zoos and aquariums had on these monument designations and other issues were so successful and helpful. So, okay. So as promised, now we're going to turn our attention into some more strategies and some tactics about how you might be able to approach an issue. The one thing is you won't learn everything today. The more you get into it, the more there is to learn. When I sort of teach this stuff, I keep coming back to when my son started playing baseball. It's human nature to throw things and catch things and swing sticks, but everything else about baseball is learned knowledge. And I think that analogy is apt in the public policy arena. So there's only, so much educating we can do today, but we're going to get busy with it. So wanted to start with, this gets into sort of having good messages and knowing what your audience is receptive to. The Ocean Project worked with these institutions, zoos and aquariums, through something called integrative grants, solutions grants. And it was funded by a grant that the Ocean Project received from NOAA. And I think it shows that some of these smaller budget lines in the federal government can be really helpful to the work we do, and to the greater cause of conservation. So these were, they were basically public opinion research, worked with impacts research, and Bill can chime in if I'm missing anything, but it basically was sort of getting a sense from the public of their views towards aquariums and zoos. And a lot of the stuff that's in this slide right here is stuff that, you know, Katie almost touched on her presentation, and Mark did as well, about being a trusted source of information. The last webinar, we talked about people coming there and expecting, you know, to hear about issues and even asks, policy asks or recommendations of actions they can take for solutions. The fact that, you know, zoos and aquariums, you think about an issue like endangered species and how much work zoos and aquariums have done to protect species, you know, in the field and in their parks and buildings. That's walking the talk. And the other thing that's really interesting here, this third to last bullet point to me, in the current climate about youth, how much contact we have with young audiences, and to think about how millennials and, you know, particularly high school kids right now are really active and interested in policy issues. And there's an opportunity, you know, for us to engage that audience. And this research tells us it makes sense for us to do it. So sort of move right into, there's lots of different structures of a campaign, and I was trying to think of something that worked best for zoos and aquariums. And so I came up with sort of, you know, basic cable, although, you know, that analogy is going to be obsolete in about 5 years when everybody's streaming, but it's a basic package of things you can do. And a lot of this was in Katie's presentation, and other zoos and aquariums have done this on their own as well on other issues. But it's basically find a high visitation spot, whether it's a theater that you have, a high traffic area. When I was at Brookfield Zoo, we had a big park that had 4 quadrants, and there was a big fountain in the middle, and people, to get from one part of the park to the other, had to go past that fountain. And that was a good place to try to, you know, to do sort of temporary exhibits to promote issues. And we had some success with that. The other thing is, you know, when I was a staffer, people would come in and tell me about a terrible problem, and then they'd walk out without asking me or my boss to do anything about it or give a solution. So you've got people interested, they're captive at that point, you know, and they're open to being asked to do something. So you want to have that as part of this as well. And then earlier, there was an earlier slide here, and I forgot to make the point about I did make the point about the evaluation culture in zoos and aquariums. You can test the messages and evaluate how well they went, but it also has the impact of your guests feeling that their opinions matter, that you really are interested in their opinions and why they feel that way. So it also sort of helps you build trust and a relationship with those people. So there's a webinar tease. Our next webinar in June, or that the Ocean Project's going to have, will be releasing the findings of some projects that we have going on right now. One's at Mystic that Katie mentioned earlier, and the other is at Texas State Aquarium, and the third is at the Seattle Aquarium. And so stay tuned for that, because that's kind of going to be off of this model. Now we had the basic cable, now we have the expanded cable, I guess. I'm not going to run through all of these, but this is basically the philosophy behind this is using all of your resources that you currently have in communicating with people. social media has so much potential on this. And as I've been preparing for these webinars, going through a lot of institutions, I see a lot of Facebook posts or tweets and stuff with videos, but there's usually no sound to it. And I mean, you can't produce everything, but I think those, for instance, that's a great example of an opportunity you have to communicate either about a public policy issue or about even, what your institution is doing, to help this animal, the particular one in the video or its wild cousins. And then, you have so many staff people who communicate with people, either, at your institution or out in community programs, and aligning their chats with whatever conservation campaigns you're running, spreads the message. And then this last one on the bottom here is particularly if you're doing sustainability work, and that gets into ocean issues and public lands issues and land protection issues as well. You're talking to your guests about what they can do. You have, and we'll get into this a little bit later with some images, an opportunity to use things like rain barrels and other infrastructure to help tell that story. So these are some more, this gets more on an expanded cable, more about sort of the human resources you have and the ability to spread your message. The ones in the middle with the sub-bullet points, I encourage people, even if you don't engage in public policy, is to try to get your local, state, or federal elected officials out for a tour. I always found when we did this, and I don't know if there are others on here who've done it, that what really they found most interesting was not hearing stories about, the animals there, but they had no idea what it takes to run a zoo on a day-to-day, or an aquarium on a day-to-day basis from the business side. And it's a great story, and that'll help you just down the road because you're building that relationship. And the other reason it makes sense to do it, particularly with local and state legislators, is a lot of them are going to, have ambitions and want to be congressmen or senators at some point. So you're getting in on the ground floor with them from the very beginning, and it helps you. It'll help you down the road when you're engaging them. And then the other one right below it about being present while being absent. I would encourage everybody to find like nice posters or other promotional materials that you have, put it in a nice frame and give it to members of Congress and state legislatures, people who have offices, so they can hang it, because staff turns over so quickly. It's a reminder to the new staff person that, oh, that's in our district, and it's visible. So when you come in there, they'll know you belong and that you're a constituent. So this is the next few slides are going to be more sort of technical advice. I think one of the big mistakes that a lot of people who are doing advocacy make is they think they have to influence a really big swath of audience. And it really, a lot of times, if you figure out a small group of people, small is defined relatively, it's easier to have a better focused message and move them to action. And that's sort of what this slide kind of gets at. But you have a big advantage over the green groups and the environmental groups that I used to work for and Mark was talking about earlier. They have to go out, find and recruit and maintain people. Aquariums and zoos have those people coming to them. So if you engage them, and let's say you get 500,000 guests a year, and you get 10% of them to do something, that is a great rate of return. It's much better than what you usually get when you're working for one of the environmental groups. So the other thing is, there's this image. It's great to have a big grassroots movement, but sometimes just having a smaller group or a smaller effort helps put an issue on the radar and frame it in a way that a big campaign really can't, because it's not so nimble. the images on the right are, Mark mentioned the Sea Youth Rise Up delegation. This was the meeting that he referred to. And if you look, if you look at this happy guy here with the halo over his head, you can see the smile on Mark's face when he was talking about what a fun meeting that was. And that helped push that issue bit by bit over the finish line. The other thing I would say is this second bullet about heartfelt letters. As a former staffer, I hated those because you couldn't just form letter at those, the response to those. You had to write them, and sometimes they were, serious enough. They had to go up the food chain to your bosses, to your chief of staff, and occasionally the member of Congress. So if you have the time to do that, that's great. And I don't think you're going to be able to get a lot of your guests to do that, but that's something for your staff, your leadership, and others, or trustee to work with them on it. And that was a great meeting. Mark is not exaggerating that. I think it was a great break in the monotony of what they were going through at that time to get that done. In the image before, one of the images, the top image on the previous slide, I'll go back to it. This is a version of that all of these kids signed it, and we gave it to them. And this is the example of sort of being present while being absent. You do things like this and the previous thing to give people a nice, pretty image that they'll want to keep around, and it serves as a reminder. This was a project we did. A lot of, you can see, I'm not sure how big the logos are, but we had like 51, 53 institutions sign on to this. And this was something at the very beginning of our efforts. It doesn't talk about the Northeast Monument at all, but it was geared towards that. And it was to show the administration that there was this constituency that had largely been silent that supported it. So, as Katie said, we had a great victory and it got done. And so when you're done with that, you want to make sure it's sort of like when you get a big gift, a donor gives a big gift to your institutions, you do donor recognition. Well, this is champion recognition. And so make sure you are always thanking people when they do great and big things. And I would also say sometimes thank them for doing nothing, where you're tricking them into thinking they're much better than they've been behaving. This was, I think we ran this ad probably about 2 or 3 days after the monument was designated. So this is getting back to, sort of the theme of a smaller audience, a targeted audience. But when people come to your institutions, they kind of let their guard down. They're relaxed, they're having fun. It's a safe space. Kids get inquisitive. Parents need to give them answers. It's a great opportunity to educate both the kids, especially if they're sort of teenagers or tweens, who are beginning to, form ideas. But then also, get their parents to be able to answer the questions and understand an issue. And it helps, I think, seed the clouds for making changes and consumer habits and lifestyle choices. But you do need to be careful, because you need to make sure your staff who's doing this can kind of read people, because there's people who don't want this, and you don't want to offend them or impose on them. So you just need to build that into whatever engagement you're doing. And I think by and large, the people that do this sort of stuff at the zoos and aquariums have a good read on this. So I wanted to share these examples. I was on a call with folks from South Carolina Aquarium recently. I don't know if they're on the call or not, but they were talking about the work they've done on plastics. So South Carolina is a deep red state. It is, you have to be careful in how you talk about issues down there. They've been doing a lot of work on plastics, and it's basically all education geared at getting people to understand the problem of plastic pollution. They are not working on any specific pending policy, but they're doing so much of this, they're helping raise awareness. amongst their community, and local government after local government in and around Charleston have been passing plastic bans. So this is an example of, you don't even have to talk about or get engaged on a policy issue that's pending. You can just talk about the issue and make a significant and meaningful contribution. And I think this is stuff that a lot of people are already doing, but this is a way to encourage it. I talked earlier about using your infrastructure to make a point. This slide up on the top here with the kids in the rain barrel at Cincinnati was, sorry about that. That was a contest where they had people paint them and made awards and put them throughout the park. So not only are they raising the awareness of people when they're in their park, they're also doing it before these barrels even get in there by the contest and publicizing the contest. It's a really cool way of promoting that issue. And I want one of those. And then you see, I talked earlier about, in the research we did in the Innovative Solutions Grants, walking the walk, and the poster on the right where it talks about how much water Cincinnati's zoo is saving because of what they've done on site, sort of gives that impression and gives you credibility to talk about the issue. And then they've done a lot of green building down there, and they've got a bunch of green roofs. And the bottom left, you see that, they have a green roof. They've got a spot that overlooks it, and they are signing it and giving people a lesson there. Not everybody's going to stop and read that. Even if it's less than 5% that people do, you're still educating and reaching them and, telling them why it's important. So I know we're getting close to the end of time, and we are almost done. Only a couple more slides. Cincinnati also has done not just the green roofs, but a lot of work and using basically the renewable energy infrastructure almost as an exhibit. There's a picture of a wind turbine they have. And I think this is a great example. There's a policing theory of the broken window, where if you let one broken window stand in a community, then there'll be 2, 3, 4, and the next thing you know, the community looks or is run down. This is kind of a reversal of that by showing that, renewable and clean energy is viable, it's feasible, it's much more viable than it was even 10 years ago. They have, and I'll show you a movie in the next slide, but it's a solar panel installation over their parking lots. I know they're not the only one who has those, but it also gives the guests the advantage who get one of those spots of a clean car, or a cool car when they're done at the end of the day. So this is a short video that I want to share with you. It does a lot of great, not just walking, sort of the walk the walk conversation, but it also has a lot of great messages about partnering with local businesses, the benefits they're getting from this. And I think it's just a really great way of talking about renewable energy. So here we go.
If you've been to the zoo this spring, or even driven down Vine Street, you might have noticed what look like giant carports are sprouting up all over the zoo's new parking lot. What they actually are is a solar power array. And it is big. It's the largest urban and educationally accessible solar power array anywhere in the United States. Now, it's important to the Cincinnati Zoo for a couple of reasons. One is it's very big. It's 1.6 megawatts of electricity, which over the year will generate 20% of the zoo's electrical needs. When it's switched on later in April, it'll be a remarkable day for the zoo. How come? Well, just like at your house, electricity is expensive, so saving 20% on our electric bill is quite significant. An exciting thing about the project is that it's all American made. The panels were made here in the United States, and the entire project was done by local firms. The structure that holds those panels was built by Rao Brothers right here on Vine Street, and the entire project was put together by Malink Solar Power out in Milford. Another great thing is that when we analyze the total energy saved, one of them is that when you come in the summer, you can park in the shade. So instead of coming out and getting in a car that's hundreds of degrees and needs to be cooled off, your car will be the same temperature as the air around you. Here at the Cincinnati Zoo's new solar power array, I'm Thane Maynard.
Okay, so I just think there were so many great messages in there, and it advertises what they're doing. I wanted to sort of give you a visual example and also give you the opportunity to stop listening to me talk for a minute and a half. We were down to the last couple of slides. I just wanted to share, this is a piece that when some of you come to town week after next for the AZA fly-in, that you'll be passing out on the Endangered Species Act. Won't go through it, but I think it's a great piece, and because it identifies the problem, talks about what zoos and aquariums have been doing, and then states the position clearly that, you know, they want to see the Endangered Species Act, you know, continue to work and be improved, and that zoos and aquariums have been engaged in species protection for, you know, decades, if not a century or more, and are going to be in the future as well. So if you go back and look at these slides and you're trying to figure out how to make 10 points about an issue, this is a good example of how to do it. I would encourage those who can to do this. It is a good way of cultivating and maintaining relationships, and it also sends to those offices, you know, there's an institutional commitment because you've sent somebody here. I know it's expensive and it's not easy, but I want to encourage folks to reconsider that as they move forward. And then the other thing that's most important about it is people like me who walk the hallways, we are always we live in DC, we are a lobbyist. You folks come in and you are real people telling real stories, and you're also happen to be real voters. So you get their attention a lot more. This is just a summary of their agenda. You can look at it again later. This is an example again of some relatively small budgeted items that are grant programs that can help not only your institution, both in conservation, but also in environmental education programs that you have, disaster response, and again, shows these small programs can have pretty important results. So I wanted to just give you one parting thought. Somebody thought this campaign message was a good idea. So it clearly probably sent the wrong message. So as you get into this sort of work, you know, put a lot of thought into what you're going to say before you speak. So that is basically it. This again will be made available to you. These are some additional resources, more information. I used at the very bottom of the page is a link to Spitfire Strategies. They have some great documents, and I sort of used them to help guide developing this. And then everybody else here, it's the materials that I used. So thank you very much. It is 1 minute late. I apologize, but we are done. If you have questions that you would like answered, I don't know if you have been sending them in. I've not seen too many of them, but there's my email, and you have gotten emails from both Bill Mott and I in the past. Feel free to reach out to me if you have any questions about what we talked about, any thoughts or ideas or advice you might need and things you're contemplating doing. We're more than happy to talk to you. And again, as I mentioned, this is the second in a series of webinars, and we will be back with one in June with results from those pilot projects that are ongoing. So thank you very much for joining us, and hope everyone has a great weekend.